Hello and welcome to 101 Code. My name is Moaz Nashawi. If you like our videos, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. In this video, we're going to talk about primitive data types and reference data types in Java. First, we're going to see what is the difference between primitive and reference types. After that, we're gonna discuss the primitive types properties such as size, value, and at the end of this video, we're gonna do some best practice and answer the question of when to use each type and why. So, in Java, there's two main categories for variable types or data types. There is the primitive types, which has 8 types inside of it, a boolean, byte, short, integer, long, char, and float and double. And there is the reference types. In the primitive types, as you can see, it's divided between the boolean category, which has true only a boolean, true or false, and inside the numeric we have the integer and the floating point. On the other hand, on the reference types is the class, interfaces, enums, arrays, and almost all other variable types. Any other variable you define in your Java code is not inside. This category here of the primitive types is called reference types or non-primitive types in other naming conventions. So let's get to the difference between the primitive types and reference type. The first difference is the primitive types store the actual value of the variable in memory. That means if you define an integer variable, let's say you define integer a inside your code and you give it the value of 77, this value will be saved directly to the memory stack. On the other hand, on the reference types, they store the address of the object they refer to. So if you instantiate an object inside your code, the address for this object is gonna be saved in the memory stack. The object itself will be saved in the heap memory. So to understand this more, let's see it in action. Let's open IntelliJ. And here I have a main class with the main method just to run my code. And I already defined a custom class called myClass to be used in this example. The custom class has always only one property, and there's an structure and getter. Nothing special about it. So we speak first about the primitive types. Let's say we define integer x and we give it a value of 77 like the picture. If you want to print the value of x, let's use a print line. Let's run the code. You can see you get 77. This raw value or simple value is saved directly to the memory. On the other hand, when we speak about the reference types, here I defined the custom object, which is my class. I defined the variable my class, and I instantiated with a new world, new my class, and I give it name as argument. If you can see now, if I want to print the value of my class, I will get an address for the object, a reference address for the object in the memory heap. So if I want to access any properties inside this class, I need to follow the class rule. And in this example, I already defined a getter for getName. Now if I run it, I can get Moaz. The second difference between primitive and reference is in the primitive types, you can instantiate the variable with a direct value or with a simple value. In case of x here, we instantiated with only a value, 77. It's based on the data type. On the other hand, in reference, you need to, in a new instance, for a variable to be instantiated since it's an object. What that mean? That mean if I want to instantiate my class, I can't use like any value, like maybe 33 or any other value or string. I have to use the new keyword to instantiate a new class. The third difference between a primitive and reference data types in Java, that's in the primitive types always has a value. Even if you didn't set it, there is a default value for it. And in other case, in the reference types, it can have no value or null. What that means? Let's get to the code to understand this and more. As a primitive type, as we said, you always can give a symbol value. You can work with a symbol value. But if you didn't provide any value, there is always default value for each variable type in the primitive type. So in case of integer, the default value is 0. We will see a table of all the default values for all the primitive types in this next chapter. So this is for primitive types. As we say, if you didn't set the value, there's always be value. One thing worth to mention between the scope of the variable in Java, the Java virtual machine will let you get away with not defining, not setting a value for primitive type if the variable is in the instance scope. So as you can see here, we're not getting any error. But if you get this variable inside the local scope, you have to give it a value. You can see here we get an error. It's a thing, something about the scope of the variable in Java. We will get to this in other videos. So getting back to the instance scope, that's for primitive. On the other hand, in case of reference data types, if you didn't instantiate your variable, you didn't use equal new and instantiated, default value of null will be set to your variable. So now if we want to print it, we will get null. So let's discuss now the primitive data types properties in details. As we said, there's 8 primitive data types, and the first one is byte. The size in memory is 1 byte, and the range, it can accept values between 128 to 127. Short, which takes size of 2 bytes in memory, and it accepts values from -32,786 to 32,776. Integer, int, take 4 bytes, and this is the range. You can take a screenshot of this table to save all the values. As you can see, there's a default value for each one. As we said, if you didn't set the value, default value will be set for you. So in the case of bytes, short, and integer, and long, it's 0 value. In case of float and double, as you can see, it's 0.0f, and double 0.0d. This is the default value. Char, this is the default value, and boolean, you know, it's true or false. The default value is false. So the main difference, as you can see, is the range and the size on the memory. Now, let's get to the best practice and answer the question of why we choose one type over another. If you want to think about your code, let's get back to the table first. If you want to think about your code, the most important things in writing a good project is the resource management. You have to be aware about all the types and what side they take in order for you to save resources and make your project for sure run faster. So in case, let's say you want to define a variable, and this variable gonna accept only up to 127 number. So it's wise to use byte, not to use integer, because byte only take 1 byte from the memory, while integer take 4 bytes. This will have good impact on your project performance. And this actually, when you go to interview, maybe the interviewer will ask you about this one and which type of primitive data type to use on this one. So in case of float of double, as you can see, the float 4 bytes and double 8 bytes. Why? Because the floats, it's only significant to 7 decimal number, while double is 8 bytes, double in size, but it can take up to 15 number. So you have to keep all this in mind when you choose the primitive types that you want to work with. On the other hand, to answer a question of what a reference data type, as we said, the reference data type is an object type which open unlimited possibilities. So it's not gonna be we're not gonna be able to cover how to which is the best case to use each reference type. So that's it for the video today. In next videos we will talk more about Java. Until then, if you like our videos, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe.